Hello everyone, this is Challenging Concepts on the Tissue lecture, chapter 4 of the Merriam textbook. So what are tissues? Tissues are a group of cells and the surrounding material. They perform a common and related function. The study of tissues is going to be called histology. So we have four main tissue types in our body. So it's going to be the epithelium, connective tissue, muscular tissue, and nervous tissue. We'll briefly describe muscular and nervous here, but they will be separate chapter topics on their own. So we'll be mainly concentrating on epithelium and connective tissue. So in terms of the epithelium, there are five main characteristics. Polarity, so which is the apex, lateral side, basal side. They have specialized contacts and they have to be supported by connective tissue. The main reason for this is that they are avascular, right? So they are avascular. So they do not have their own blood supply. So they depend on the blood supply from the connective tissue. They have a very good regeneration capacity, so they can replace and repair very, very efficiently. So here are the surfaces, polarity-wise, apical. We think of an apex of a pyramid is the top of the pyramid. So this apical region or surface of the epithelium will be facing either the outside, for example, our skin, or the lumen in terms of the cavities. Basal is kind of the opposite end. It's the base, the basement, and it's attached to the basement membrane, which is the boundary of the epithelium. And then we also have the lateral surface, right? So the sides of the cells, which will be attached to other adjacent cells. So let's go through some of the tissues, epithelial tissues, and their significance, functional significance, as well as locations. First, we're going to start with simple squamous. So simple means one layer, squamous is flattened cells. So because they are thin, their function is to allow particles to move by diffusion. So this picture is of our alveoli. Those are the air sacs in our lung. So all this space here will be air. There's some blood vessels around here. So they will just diffuse into the capillary by simple diffusion. We all simple squamous epithelium in structures which have filtration. For example, in our glomeruli, that's a ball of capillaries in our kidneys. In terms of location, you want to be specific. Don't just give the organ, because organ generally has 3 or more tissues, a little more detail. So if you choose the kidney, you want to say kidney glomeruli. The alveoli in the lungs are great, and any of the blood vessel linings, heart linings, was another good example of location. Next one is simple cuboidal. So it's simple, one layer, cuboidal. It's a cube 3-dimensionally. So in 2D pictures, you're going to see it as a square, more or less. So this one you have to imagine if you think about a paper and you roll it up to form a tube, that's kind of what this is. This is the basement membrane, and these are the cells, right? Those are the cells within the epithelium. Okay, so in terms of function, secretion, absorption, location, I usually actually study the locations first. That way it also helps me to picture their function. Okay, so in terms of simple cuboidal, you want to say kidney tubules. Again, do not just say kidney, but you want to say kidney tubules. We also find it on the surface of ovaries as well. The next one is simple columnar, so they're going to be one layer and column shape. So basically that's the basement membrane here. These are the cells. So in terms of function, or let's talk about location again. So they're located in our digestive tract, starting from the stomach all the way to the rectum. So you can think about they will be able to secrete substances, okay, secretion of mucus, enzymes, for example, as well as absorption. Those are going to be the main functions of simple columnar. So if they have cilia, kind of added function is that they'll also be able to move substances across the cell surface. So it's mucus. So they are found in our respiratory tract, lower respiratory tract, small bronchi. Okay, those are two good places. Another one with cilia will be the fallopian tubes, where they move the ovum, the egg. The next one is pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. So they look like layered. This is the basement membrane. If you look at the individual or rows of the neuron, you may think that they're stratified. But if we follow each cell, it's not very visible in this uh, picture, but all of them will be attached to the basement membrane. So they appear to be stratified, I beg your pardon. And the pseudostratified columnar epithelium, a good place we can find it is trachea and large bronchi. So here again, similar to simple squamous, they're here, they will secrete mucus, and they'll also move the mucus across because of cilia. Okay. Next one is stratified squamous epithelium. So basically the layer starts from here and it's going upwards. The best place to see the beautiful squamous is a little bit higher up rather than here. Here I'm dividing mitotically active cells. They're going to push their way up. In terms of location, it's in our oral cavity, esophagus, anus, vagina. All of these have stratified squamous epithelium, and it's called non-keratinized, and then we'll cover in the next chapter keratinized form, which is in the top layer of our skin, the epidermis of our skin. There the difference will be the cells on top are actually dead cells, so they will not have nuclei. Okay, in terms of function, because they're multiple layers, they're going to protect the underlying layers from abrasion. Abrasion is just when you rub against your skin, that is kind of an abrasive kind of a motion. Food goes down our gullet, goes down the esophagus, it can cause abrasion of the esophagus. So these will protect underlying layers. Next one is called transitional. Here the epithelial, the shapes are changing as they move upwards. Best one is to be seen more cuboidal shape at top. So they are found in urinary bladder and ureters. Ureters can connect the kidneys to the urinary bladder. Here, the idea is when they stretch, these cells have the capacity to change kind of shape, be able to stretch and not slough off itself. Okay, so that basically covers the epithelial tissue. Next, we're going to move to connective tissue. This is the most abundant in our body, most distributed, and they also have different types, subtypes. So we basically classify them as connective tissue proper. This one will go into more detail. There's 6 subtypes in there. They'll split into 2 first, and then each of those 2 is divided into 3. Then we have cartilage. We have 3 types of cartilage. Then we have bone, and we have liquid connective tissue. That's going to be our blood and lymph. So let's go. So in terms of connective tissue, all connective tissues have 3 elements in common. They have something called a ground substance or extracellular matrix. If you think about cartilage, you can think about gelatinous matrix. If you think about blood, for example, that's our liquid. It has a liquid, the plasma portion is the liquid matrix of it. Fibers, 3 main fibers in our connective tissue. It's collagen, elastic, and reticular. Collagen the thickest, elastic is next, and then reticular is the thinnest. Reticular also has number of branches. Cells, depending on the tissue, they can be very specific, and we have a slide on that. So composition and arrangement will vary. Connective tissue are highly vascularized. They also have good innervation, they have good blood nerve innervation as well. Highly vascularized with one exception. It's the cartilage. Besides the cartilage, all other connective tissues are highly vascularized. Cartilage, unfortunately, is not. So if someone damages their cartilage, it's going to take them a long time to heal because the blood supply comes from connective tissue that surrounds the cartilage itself. Okay. So let's talk about some cells that can be found in connective tissue. So we have what we can say a group of cells, not necessarily all grouped together, but these are cells that are found in different tissues, blast cells. Okay, they are the immature form of the cell, and their main function is to secrete the ground substance or fibers, right? So fibroblasts, we can find them in a lot of our connective tissue. They will produce the fibers. Chondroblasts, chondr is in reference to cartilage, so they are found in cartilage and they'll secrete the extracellular matrix for cartilage. And similarly, osteoblasts are found in bone and they'll secrete the extracellular matrix. While cyte is for mature form of cells found in connective tissue and other places too, but mature form of cell. Here in connective tissue, they basically maintain the matrix. They're kind of the conductor of the orchestra, if you want to think of it that way. And we'll actually look at it that way in chapter 6 when we talk about the bone osteocytes, how they coordinate other cells. And there are also other cells in our connective tissue, adipocytes, fat cells, white blood cells, different types of white blood cells can be found in our connective tissue, and then macrophages, they will help swallow debris and foreign organisms. So here's a little drawing of connective tissue. So the thickest fiber will be the collagen fiber, the white one here. The next thickest will be the orange. That will be our elastic fibers. The thinnest one here is the blue with a lot of branches. That will be reticular fibers. And then you have the blood cells spread throughout, and anywhere that you do not get fiber or cells, not just blood cells, sorry, other cells spread throughout. Anywhere that we do not get cells or fibers will be ground substance or extracellular matrix. So let's look at connective tissue proper first. So connective tissue proper can be divided into loose connective tissue and dense connective tissue. So first we're going to look at the three types of loose connective tissue. As the name suggests, dense is a little bit more tightly packed, loose is not as tightly. Areolar connective tissue you can kind of think of as airy kind of thing. In terms of the slide histology, I usually describe this as a dirty hair slide, like lots of hair fibers with some things that's there, right? So it's got a lot of spaces. As every other connective tissue does support, but the main distinguishing feature of areolar connective tissue, which is different from others, is that it is a reservoir of salt and water. Okay, that's the main difference with other connective tissue. Then adipose connective tissue, adipose is fat. Their main function is to store triglycerides. That's the storage form of fat in our body, right? They also will provide cushioning. They're found around organs, even the heart. Around our heart, we have adipose connective tissue. Areolar connective tissue is found in our skin, for example, in the papillary layer of the dermis. It's also found a lot of our kind of a capsule around organs, around even in joints. We find areolar connective tissue. The last of the loose connective tissue is called reticular connective tissue. The name kind of gives away that, hopefully it gives away that there are a lot of reticular fibers. So there's a lot of network of reticular fibers which kind of give this web-like appearance or web-like structure, which allows, this is mainly found in spleen and a little bit in lymph nodes as well. They allow these organs to filter. So they're here in the spleen, they're going to filter out blood. Okay. So next is our dense connective tissue. There are again three types of dense connective tissue. We have dense regular connective tissue. Here the fibers are arranged in the same plane. They're going the same direction, so they will be able to absorb strain in one direction. They are found in tendons, ligaments, and upper neuroses. Upper neuroses are also connections of muscles to bone, but they are flat muscles, and these are flat structures, or more, whereas tendons are more rope-like or rod-like structures. So they will absorb strain in one direction. dense, irregular connective tissue, they will absorb strain in multiple directions because the fibers are going in multiple directions. And in the next chapter, we'll talk about the reticular layer of the dermis that contains dense, irregular connective tissue. So the reticular layer of dermis. The last of the dense connective tissue is dense elastic connective tissue. I know a lot of books just describe as elastic connective tissue, but keep emphasizing on the word dense because we also have elastic cartilage. So we don't want ourselves to get mixed up with those. So the name kind of will tell us that it has a lot of elastic fibers. So elastic fibers gives us kind of elasticity. Similarly, elastic cartilage also does, but that's cartilage. This is dense connective tissue. So all these black squiggly lines, you may not see that squiggle as they are lines specifically. Those are the elastic fibers. These are found in organs which need to nice stretch and recoil quicker, more than urinary bladder that we talked about transitional. So here the aorta, the largest artery in our body, has a lot of elastic connective tissue. Our lung tissue has a lot of elastic connective tissue. Next is cartilage. So cartilage has gel-like ground substance. It has collagen fibers and elastic fibers. As I mentioned earlier, these are the only connective tissue which are avascular, do not have its own vascularization. So they need the connective tissue surrounding cartilage, which is called perichondrium, to supply it with blood supply. Chondrocytes, hopefully you recall, are the mature cartilage cells. So the three types of cartilage are hyaline, elastic, and fibro. They all will be able to absorb shock to a certain extent. Elastic also is flexible, it bounces back, and fibrocartilage will absorb the most amount of stress. What I might even go with is trying to remember the location of the other two, and everywhere else is hyaline. Okay, so let's just go over hyaline. It's between bones in our limb bones, most joints between our limb bones, arms, legs, the bones between them will be mostly hyaline cartilage. We also find them in respiratory tube, whether it's our larynx, trachea, bronchi have them, and this is how we also build long bones. So they're precursor to bone when we were embryos in our mother's wombs. The next one we're going to talk about is fibrocartilage. This is the most absorbing of strain, of shock, beg your pardon. They're found in three places. Between our pubic bones, it's called pubic symphysis. Between the they are the intervertebral discs. Those are between the vertebral body, so that's part of our spine, and also the menisci in our knees. We have two in each knee. The last one is elastic. So it's the outer portion of our ear, so ear pinna, as well as epiglottis. Epiglottis controls, makes sure that food and water does not go into our larynx. It shuts it off and directs the food and water down into the esophagus, right? So at the top of the larynx. So those are the three types of cartilage. So bone-wise, osteocytes are a mature bone cells. We have two types of bone connective tissue. We'll talk more in detail in chapter 6 of the textbook. It's compact bone. It's much more harder, as the name suggests, and then spongy bone. Compact bone, this is actually compact bone, and one of these is the osteon. That's the subunit of compact bone, while the subunit of spongy bone is called trabecular. We'll look at it again in chapters 6. Many functions. They have protection, support, and muscle attachment, which helps movement, but they also have mineral storage, calcium and phosphate. They also store fat, yellow bone marrow, and they also produce blood cells, red bone marrow. Liquid connective tissue, two main types. Blood is our one tissue, so we have blood, plasma, which is the fluid extracellular matrix, ECM, and then formed elements. Reason why some books think of it as not cells themselves, because platelets are broken down cells. They're not actually cells. So we have the red blood cells, erythrocytes, white blood cells, leukocytes. Platelets are thrombocytes. Their function, you can talk about each of the cell functions separately, as well as the function of the blood plasma altogether. Lymphatic is the other one. Lymph is the fluid extracellular matrix. They're mainly found in lymphatic vessels. The main type of cells in them is lymphocytes. That's one type of white blood cell. Main function of the lymphatic tissue is to transport lymphocytes and other nutrients. Fat actually is transported from our small intestines. They will be taken to where the jugular vein meets the subclavian vein near our neck, and then they will go into the blood supply. So that is a quick overview of connective tissue. Just a little synopsis of the other two tissues. Muscle tissues, we have three different types: cardiac, smooth, and skeletal. Cardiac's only found in the heart wall, and smooth muscles are mainly found in hollow organs, our digestive tract, urogenital tract, respiratory tract. We also find them in our iris of our eye. Skeletal muscles are attached to bone. In terms of striations, those are striped. Hopefully you can see the different colors. The only two muscles which are striated are skeletal and cardiac. Smooth is not. In terms of nuclei, smooth is always one per cell. A skeletal is multiple, usually tens, even a couple of hundred per cell. Cardiac is mostly one, sometimes two. In terms of voluntary control, the only one we can consciously control, voluntary control, is skeletal. The other two cannot be controlled voluntarily. Intercalated discs, which are found in cardiac muscles, that's this black darkened structure here. That will be connections between one cardiac muscle cell to the next cell. Next one is nervous tissue. Again, we'll talk about this in chapter 11. Neurons are the main player, if you will, the star of the nervous tissue, that is to transmit nerve. Okay. But the others play very important roles. Neuroglia or neuroglial cells, sometimes called glial cells as well. They will be supporting and maintaining neurons. A good example we'll talk about here is Schwann cell that produces myelin, which surrounds neurons, axons of neurons. The next, next thing we're going to just mention is membranes. We have epithelial membranes, which contain one layer of epithelium and connective tissue lying underneath. Cutaneous, that's our skin. We'll talk about that in the next chapter. Epithelium, epidermis on top, dermis at the bottom, connective tissue. Mucous membranes, as the name hopefully suggests, they will produce mucus. That's found in our respiratory tract, digestive and urogenital tract. These epithelial cells are columnar cells which produce mucus, so those are goblet cells. Serous membranes, they have serous lining, they produce this viscous, slippery fluid. We have them in three main places: one around our heart called the pericardium, then around our lungs called the pleura, and then around the abdominal organs called the peritoneum. So this is a quick synopsis, quick review of chapter 4 on tissues. Here is the capacity for regeneration. Thank you, and I'll catch you in another video.